Hare Krishna, glad to be back. And today we will cover the second part of chapter 9 of canto 2, the very important Chatur Shloki Bhagavatam, which is very, very important. And the name of the chapter is Answers by Citing the Lord's Version. So before we get into this wonderful 4 shlokas, let me summarize what we did last time. Half of the chapter, more than half of the chapter 9, and then we will begin our PowerPoint. So in chapter 8, Maharaj Parikshit had asked many questions. The first question that he asked was to describe the difference between the soul and the body. And how does the soul, which is spiritual, acquire a temporary material body? What is the cause of this? So Shukadev Goswami answered this in the first 3 verses of chapter 9. That it is just like a dream. The soul is dreaming, and that his identity is with the material body, just like a person in his bed is dreaming. He's dreaming so many things. And actually, they don't have any reality. But in the second verse, Shukadev Goswami describes how, according to different dreams, he acquires so many forms, one material body after another. And in each one, he's thinking, this is me, this is mine. But actually, this is not us. In the third verse, Shukadev Goswami describes that when the living entity becomes situated in his constitutional glory, he gives up the false conception of I and mine, and he awakens his blissful consciousness. So this was Parikshit Maharaj's first question. And then in his next question, he had asked that Brahma takes birth from the abdomen of Lord Vishnu, from the lotus stem, which sprouts from his navel. So Brahma takes birth from his body. He's manifested from the Lord's body. So what is the difference between the Lord's body and the bodies of living entities? Because Brahma is also a living entity. If they are both souls and they both take material bodies, just like the Lord also takes a Virat Rupa, of course, we know that it's not material exactly. So the point is that if the Lord has his body and the living entity takes up different bodies, so what is the difference between the Lord and the living entity's bodies? And this question was answered in verse 4. That actually there are 2 souls, Jivatma and Paramatma, and the differences between the 2. Then we heard about Brahma's birth in the rest of the verses in chapter 9 that we heard last time. We heard about Brahma's birth from the lotus flower and how he could not see anything. So wondering about his source, he travels down to the stem of the lotus, through the stem of the lotus, and comes back disappointed. And then he hears the word tapa, which means penance. He understands that this is the instruction of the Lord, because there was no one else existing at that time. And so he engages in penance for 1,000 years. The Lord becomes so pleased with him and shows him Vaikuntha. And of course, at some point, one of the Matajis asked me about whether he saw both. And that question is answered, but not quite directly, in terms of that he did see Golok Vrindavan actually, and because he recited the Brahma Samhita, So, but in this chapter, the description of Vaikuntha was given. So after which he spoke the Brahma, so later on he spoke the Brahma Samhita. So this following are some beautiful verses describing the Vaikuntha Vasis. And Lord, being very pleased with Brahma, speaks the 4 verses called the Chatur Shloki Bhagavatam. Actually, we are very fortunate because we're hearing what Brahma was hearing. By the mercy of Srila Prabhupada and the Guru Parampara, we can hear this very, very confidential knowledge. Brahma performed austerities for so long, and finally, when the Lord was pleased with him, Brahma asked him to explain the essence of Vedic knowledge in these 4 verses. So the entirety of Vedic knowledge, the actual meaning of transcendental knowledge, the essence of Vedanta Sutra is all in these 4 verses. Krishna says that knowledge about him is very secret and is to be realized in combination with good devotional service. So Srimad Bhagavatam is a beautiful literature, which is from and even the same as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this literature was first spoken by the Lord to Brahma. Brahma asked Narad Muni to expand, clarify these 4 original verses after hearing it from the Lord. And now we have 18,000 verses, and it is very wonderful and very powerful. And why did the Lord give this Srimad Bhagavatam to Brahma? Because he had painstakingly done something for the Lord's pleasure. As we know, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that we offer, even if you offer 1 leaf, flower, fruit, but with bhakti, he will accept it. So bhakti is what pleases Krishna, but that bhakti is very rare. So these 4 verses are divided into 3 categories. And what are the 3 categories? Sambandha, which means the knowledge of our relationship with Krishna, Abhideya, the practices of devotional services, and Prayojan, or the goal of all practices. So these 4 verses are divided in that way. So the first 2 verses, 33 and 34, are about Sambandha Gyan, the knowledge of our relationship with Krishna. These verses describe the extent of the Lord's existence, where the Lord's existence extends to. Is there any place where the Lord is not there? So it's very. So the first verse basically covers how the Lord says that He existed before the creation. He is the one who maintains the creation during creation, and he is the only one who exists after everything is destroyed. So let's move on to our first slide. The Lord gives knowledge about himself, Sambandha Gyan, verse 33. So I'll read the text. Ham eva sam evagra nanyad yas asad param paschad aham yad itascha yo vashishyat yeta sosmi aham. Translation: Brahma, it is I, the personality of Godhead, who was existing before the creation, when there was nothing but myself, nor was there the material nature, the cause of this creation. That which you see is also I, the personality of Godhead, and after annihilation, what remains will be also I, the personality of Godhead. So in this verse, the verse aham is mentioned 3 times. Because what the Lord is going to describe is a complete reality. He's going to talk about himself. He's speaking to Brahma. He's standing right before him. Brahma has just done the austerities, and the Lord is pleased with him and showed him himself and the spiritual world. He saw the airplanes, their residence, their skin color, and the Lord shook his hands. He said, because you have pleased me, I'm going to show you everything. My transcendental existence, my eternal form, my color, qualities, pastimes. So he says aham, which means I, 3 times. He says that. But Prabhupada writes that how amazingly enough the Mayavadis twist the words that everything is one and there is no form, opposite to what the Lord is saying. And Prabhupada has spent a lot of time smashing this interpretation, which we will cover, of course, later on in our next slide. So at every point, Krishna wants to make the point that it is he who is speaking. Later on in the 11th canto, Krishna also said to Uddhava that I explained this knowledge to Brahma at the beginning of creation. And what he's saying is that no other thing existed before him. Before the creation, the Supreme Personality of God had existed and the material nature was there. And he glanced at it. And by that glance, he impregnated it with time, with living entities, etc. But before that, nothing was there. And then everything was wound up within him. So he says, there was nothing but myself. At the end, it will be I who will be in existence. That which you see now is also I. In the past, it is only the Lord. The present is only the Lord. And after annihilation, it is going to be just me. So the Lord has three energies: the internal energy, we know, the Vishnu Shakti, and then the living entities, which is also spiritual energy, even though the living entity is trapped within the body. And then the third one is the external energy, which is matter. That this Maya Shakti is like darkness, and that this darkness cannot come before the Lord. So in the proper sense, it is that everything that we see, everything in existence is Krishna. Just like all light from the sun is really, all light is really sun, because it is of the same quality and is coming from the sun. So Krishna is saying that I existed before everything before the cause and effect of the material world. So the point to think is that if matter is created, and if there's nothing before it was created, and if someone existed before that creation, it implies that he had no material existence. He has no material existence. But he's a person with characteristics, and he will reveal his guna, his characteristics, his qualities, pastimes. It means that he has qualities. He's a person, and he exists in a purely spiritual sense. And then when we say that he existed alone, it is the same as saying, Prabhupada gives such a nice example in the pulpit, where he says that it's the same as saying that the king is alone in his palace. So if someone says that the king is alone in the palace, it does not mean that he's alone in the palace all by himself, but it means that there is no one in the kingdom. That there is so many people in the kingdom. In other words, there are servants in the kingdom, and his army is there. There's so many people in the kingdom, even though when we say the king is alone in the kingdom, it actually means that he's alone with his servants. In the same way, when Krishna is saying that I'm alone, he's talking in relationship with his intimates, associates in the spiritual world. He's always there with them, and the spiritual world always exists. In other words, when Krishna is alone, it means that he's with all his personalities in the spiritual world. Because this is how Krishna speaks, that he alone is existing before creation, before material creation. And in the end, he alone is existing. So it doesn't mean that Krishna is there alone. It means that he's there with all his intimate associates in the spiritual world. So Krishna, it means Krishna with his associates. So we'll move on to our next slide, which is a continuation of this, verse 33. I wanted to highlight, because Prabhupada's, the Mayavadi's interpretation of the first verse, and how Prabhupada refutes it. Because he spent many verses, many paragraphs on this. It's important. So what is the theory of the impersonalist? As Prabhupada writes, he is a theory of oneness. They say that because Brahma is the creation of the Lord, he's also impersonal. The impersonalist says that since everything is I, the Lord, and everything is the same as the Lord, so everything is I. Everything is same as the Lord. So he's God, I'm God, we are all God. Since Brahma is an emanation of the Lord, he's identical with the Lord. That's what they say. And so there's nothing more than the principle of I. Now, Prabhupada refutes that by saying that accepting the argument of the impersonalist, that we can say that the Lord is a creator I and Brahma is a created I. See how well he refutes that. Okay, they're saying that everything is I, so everything is one. So we can take that argument and say that, okay, the Lord is the creator I, and we all are the created I's. So they both have identity, but one is the creator I, and the others are the created I's. So there's a difference between the predominator and the predominated. So then Prabhupada writes how we must note carefully that these two I's is the same as in the sense of quality, not in terms of quantity. Both the creator I and the created I are both accepted in the Vedas as qualitatively same, but he is unlimitedly big and we are tiny emanations from the Lord. They are parts of the whole. They are not the same in quantity, but the same in quality. The singular I is the creator, and the created I's are plural because they are many in number. Because Brahma again generates so many living entities. Prabhupada says, it is a great illusion when we think that we are God. Because are we creating the sun and the moon? Or are we thinking, oh, we are God, but we have just forgotten it? That's what the Mayavadi says. We're just God for the time being. It is very foolish and crazy. And the example that he gives is how the father creates the son and the son creates his own son. But the father, son, and grandson are all different. The son cannot take the place of the father, nor can the grandsons. Simultaneously, the father, son, and grandson are also different. Are also the similar as human beings. They're one, but they're also different. The predominator I and the predominated I are the same, but different. There's a predominator I who's feeding the rest, fulfilling all their desires. One is dependent and the other one is independent. So in this way, Prabhupada strongly refutes this. And he says that how, if the Lord is speaking to Brahma, so he's an individual, and Brahma is an individual, and they both have personalities. Brahma has just been liberated by the Lord, and the Lord is still a person, even after Brahma has been liberated, right? So he's still a person. It means that even after liberation, the individual and the Lord remain persons. One doesn't just become everything and nothing. So the predominator I and the predominated I are personal. And the other thing that impersonalists say is that when realizes the truth, everything becomes one with no qualities remaining. But this is refuted in verse 32 earlier, where the Lord says, yes, there's impersonal existence, but within that existence, there is my form, qualities, and pastimes. So the Krishna is also can be understood in the impersonal way. It does exist, but it's not the highest. So interestingly enough, where the impersonalist says that Lord has no qualities, which means that, and they say that everything's one, we are all the same. That means they cannot ask for any mercy. Prabhupada writes. Because if there's no qualities, you cannot ask anyone for mercy, because mercy can come only from a person. So the impersonalists cannot even get mercy because they don't believe in quality. So it's very reassuring for us that the Lord is full of mercy. So we'll move on to our next slide, which is text 34. Anything seen separate from him is not reality. It is like reflection that appears to be in darkness. So in this, I'll read the translation. I'll read the verse also. Rite ritam yat pratiyeta na pratiyeta chatmani tad vidyad atmano mayam yatha bhaso yatha tama. O Brahma, whatever appears to be of any value, if it is without relation to me, it has no reality. Know it to be my illusory energy, that reflection which appears to be in darkness. Now, this verse means that we see as valuable anything that we see as valuable in this world, whether it is cars, trees, lakes, rivers, oil, whatever, other people. If we are seeing that object without a relationship to Krishna, we should know, Krishna says, you should know that it is my Maya. In other words, he's saying, while separated from me, it has no value. Just like if the finger is cut off, what value would that be? Similarly, when we disconnect things to Krishna, then it loses its value. It means simply that Maya is threatening us. And Krishna is saying, you should know that this is my illusory energy, which covers the vision by which a person thinks this is worthy to be enjoyed without Krishna. It is like a reflection in darkness. So if the sun and light is Krishna, and if Prabhupada explains this in this way, with this analogy, and if I had a mirror here, and we see the reflection of the sun, which is only a reflection in that mirror, and which is only a reflection, it's just simply a reflection of the light. So it is a reflection of the actual sun, which is Maya. And anything that's reflected and is shone in our eyes, we get blinded and we cannot see anything. Similarly, when we are in Maya, we cannot see things as they are. We value things separate from Krishna, but in fact, nothing is separate from Krishna. One simply becomes dazzled by the reflection and cannot see Krishna. So Prabhupada writes that in Glok Vrindavan, in Vaikuntha, there's unlimited bliss. So we have to stop being dazzled by Maya. So what is the pleasure in this material world by which we are dazzled? It is only in the anticipation, when you really, really think about it and analyze. So the pleasure is in the anticipation, imagining that when I get this, I will be so happy. If I go there, marry this person, get this education, this job, grow long hair, maybe dye my hair, that will give me happiness. I will be so happy. In our mind, we project the reflection of spiritual world, thinking we are going to be happy. And as soon as we remove this mood that I am the enjoyer, then Maya cannot touch us. Whatever we see here, the actual substance is far away, very far away. Although this may appear glittering. So in other words, the spiritual world is brightly illuminated, but the material world is wrapped in darkness. So we'll move on to our next slide, which is a continuation of this verse. It's the next verse, the prayojan. Okay, so we just discussed the sambandha, knowledge of the existence of the Lord, and now we'll move on to prayojan. Now this seems very strange because the next one is the process, which is avideya. Why the prayojan is first being explained in text 35 instead of the avideya, the process to achieve the goal of knowledge. The reason is because when we understand the goal of what we are doing, the goal, of what we are doing, then the process becomes more exciting. When you know this is the goal and this is where you have to get, and the goal is very wonderful, then the process becomes easier and more exciting. So this verse deals with prayojan, the ultimate goal of knowledge. So in this verse, the Lord explains the secret of love for him. Because if that material mind is there, one will not develop love of God. So how to develop love of God? So one has to learn how to develop this love. So in this third verse, the prayojan is explained. And in the fourth verse, the process will be explained. So I'll read the translation. O Brahma, please know that the universal elements enter into the cosmos and at the same time do not enter into the cosmos. Similarly, I myself also exist within everything created and at the same time I'm outside of everything. So this verse means that the elements are outside and inside. So to see how Krishna is going to be describing the goal in a more indirect way. And we'll explain further why. So he's saying that he is both outside, in the material world, but he's also in Goloka as well as in the, he's outside in Goloka, Vrindavan, in the spiritual world, but he's also in the hearts of his loving devotees. So Krishna is already there as a super soul. And what is it that attracts him into the hearts of the devotees as Shyama Sundara? It is love only. He cannot keep away. So this is prayojan, love of Godhead. The five material elements are existing inside and outside of everything. Similarly, Krishna is manifesting within the hearts and outside as well. So in this verse, in verse 35, we will hear the great, great secret, the hidden knowledge that even if one hears it, one will not see it unless one is very fortunate. It is so hidden. But Krishna speaks in this hidden way. But this hidden way is revealed by the acharyas. So he says that the Vedas talk about him indirectly, and Krishna prefers that indirect interpretation. It is more subtle, and he prefers that because it's confidential knowledge, and he doesn't want to reveal himself so easily. So this will take us to our next slide, which is a continuation of this verse, verse 35. What is the secret that allows one to see him everywhere? And we'll describe the different grades of devotees. So Prabhupada explains that when a materialist sees the world, he sees only matter. Now it's interesting how the term materialist came about. It was coined by a German philosopher in the 1850s, and he was very proud of proclaiming himself as a materialist. And what did he say? Is that he believed in whatever he saw. So all he saw was matter, both inside and outside. He did not think of himself as a spiritualist, as the spiritualists see him, but he saw this as the greatest compliment. So there was no imagination. He just believed in whatever he saw, both inside and outside. Just like the Brahma or the Mayavadis who think that Krishna is how the Supreme is both inside and outside. So everything is Brahman. Everything is one. Inside the universe is Brahman, and outside the universe is Brahman. Everything is non-differentiated oneness without qualities. He sees Brahman everywhere. And what do the yogis see? They agree with the impersonalist that the Lord is all pervading inside and outside, but they will see how the Lord is pervading in his super soul form. So this is a progress. So when they see the material world, they see the super soul existing outside and within every living entity. In every atom and between every atom, there is a super soul. The devotees of Lord Narayan will see Narayan within and outside of everyone. The devotees of Krishna will see only Krishna and his pastimes within everything and outside of everything. This is a devotee. So now, what is the secret that allows one to see Krishna? So Prabhupada explains that what do we see now? We simply see a mind. So you can imagine what condition we would have to be in so that Krishna will enter our mind and into our consciousness so that we can only see him. That secret is called prema, love of Krishna. This prema is a secret that allows everything to be revealed to the highest degree. And if one does not have this secret, then no matter how much one tries, one will not be able to see Krishna. And when he has this prema, no matter how hard he tries, he will only, not to see him, he will only see Krishna, like the gopis. Right? So in the purport, Prabhupada writes that how the impersonalist can imagine or even perceive that the Supreme Brahman is thus all-pervading, and therefore they conclude that there's no possibility of his personal form. Herein lies the mystery of his transcendental knowledge. This mystery is transcendental love of Godhead, and one who is surcharged with such transcendental love of Godhead can without difficulty see the personality of Godhead in every atom and every movable or immovable object. And at the same time, he can see the personality of Godhead in his own abode, Goloka, enjoying eternal pastimes with his eternal devotees, who are also expansions of his transcendental existence. This vision is the real mystery of spiritual knowledge. This mystery can be revealed through the process recommended by Brahmaji in his Brahma Samhita 538. Premanjana churitena bhakti vilochena santa sadeva hirdeshu vilokayanti yam shama sundram achintya guna sarupam govindam adi purusham tamaham bhajami. I worship the original personality of Godhead, Govinda, whom the pure devotees, their eyes smeared with the ointment of love of Godhead, always observe within their hearts. This Govinda, the original personality of Godhead, Sri Shyamasundara, is Shyamasundara with all transcendental qualities. And so Prabhupada is explaining how this love of Godhead can be attained only by the practice of transcendental loving service to the Lord and nothing else. In other words, as the universal elements are both within and without, similarly, the Lord's name, form, quality, pastimes, entourage, everything as they are described in the revealed scriptures, and as performed in the Vaikuntha Lokas, far, far away from the material cosmic manifestation, are factually being televised in the heart of the devotee. This is how Prabhupada compares. That how the universal elements are both within and without. Similarly, the Lord's pastimes and name and qualities are also being are within Vaikuntha Loka and Golok Vrindavan, but they are also being televised in the heart of the devotee. See the comparison? Very nice. So the man with a poor fund of knowledge, he cannot understand this. But by television, he can see that, right? So the same way, a spiritually developed person is able to have the television of the kingdom of God always reflected within his heart. That is the mystery of knowledge of the personality of Godhead. So Prabhupada goes on to explain that Krishna will give mukti to anyone who's deserving, which means bondage from material existence. Yet he rarely awards the privilege of love of Godhead. And this love of Godhead is so wonderful that the occupation keeps the deserving devotee always wrapped in psychological activities. So nicely Prabhupada explains this. It's so wonderful that the devotee is always engaged in these activities, these devotional activities, without deviation from the absolute touch. Thus, this love of God had developed in the heart of the devotee is a great mystery. And Brahmaji then talks about himself, earlier, that how his desires are always fulfilled by the Lord because he's always absorbed in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. And he has no other desire other than to serve the Lord. So in the same way that the Lord's desire is infallible because he's Achyuta, similarly the desires of the devotees in the trance are also Achyuta, infallible. So we'll move on to the next slide, the process of reaching love of God, which is the last of the 4 verses, Abhideya, verse 36. And after this verse, after which completes the Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojan. So in the first 2 verses, we realize that he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He exists. His energy is all that exists. Even though he is alone, he exists in Goloka. We also understood that we have a relationship with Krishna as his energy, just like the material world is his energy. And so it should be used in his service. And we should also be used in his service. We are Krishna's superior energy, but we are separated energies. And when one realizes this, one engages in devotional service. And when one engages in devotional service, one attains the goal of prema bhakti. Because of love of Krishna, one sees in prema bhakti he sees him both inside and outside. So that these were the 3 verses that we just covered. And the example are the gopis, whose eyes are smeared with love. And to the point that they were seeing Krishna, they were talking with plants. Wherever they looked, they saw Krishna both inside and outside. In their deepest separation from Krishna, they saw Krishna. So now this verse will describe the process by which one achieves the goal. And the purport that Prabhupada gives in this verse is the longest of all. So I'll read the translation of this 4th verse. A person who is searching after the supreme absolute truth, the personality of Godhead, must certainly search for it up to this, in all circumstances, in all space of time, both directly and indirectly. So Prabhupada explains that what people are searching for really today is sense gratification. But what they don't realize, by satisfying Krishna's senses, our own senses will become satisfied. Because he's everything. He's mother, father, he's pranadhan, right? But if they are looking for Krishna indirectly, the goal of prema bhakti will not be manifest. Actually, people are looking for Krishna. They just don't know. So Prabhupada explains the process by explaining that to reach this point of prayojan, love of Krishna, we must first of all inquire. And who should we inquire from? In other words, in all places and in all circumstances and at all times, everyone should be just focused upon this inquiry about this prema bhakti. So this is the process. Our life should be only dedicated to inquire about this prema bhakti, how to achieve this, even though it's so confidential. But unless we understand what it is, how do we develop a desire to achieve it? So Prabhupada explains in the purport that the result of practicing all the practices is love for Krishna by the process of hearing and chanting. This is the practice of devotional service. So Prabhupada in the purport, he goes over this verse line by line. And he says that for those who are searching for the absolute truth, he must search it to the point of prema bhakti, even though he's a Vedantist, yogi, or whatever. But the ultimate conclusion is to understand Bhagavan. So I can read a little bit of the purport here. The Vedanta, where Prabhupada writes, the Vedanta Sutra of philosophy begins with this inquiry about life, and the Bhagavatam answers such inquiries up to this point, or the mystery of all, which is the mystery of all inquiries. So Brahma wants to be educated by the personality of Godhead, and here is the answer by the Lord, finished in 4 nutshell verses. This is the end of all self-realization processes. But here is the real goal of life, and everyone should know it by inquiries put before a bona fide spiritual master, expert in the science of Bhakti Yoga, or from a living personality of Bhagavatam. Such a bona fide spiritual master is able to clear up the whole thing by evidence from the revealed scriptures, both direct and indirect. So the process is to read from scriptures, but we have to hear these scriptures from the mouth of a pure devotee. So now Prabhupada moves on to the actual process of how to perform this bhakti. So far, we have discussed why we should perform devotional service. So Prabhupada explains how Lord can be served by all the senses, even by the mind. And he gives the example of the South Indian Brahmin who served the Lord simply on the strength of the mind, but also factually realized the Lord. So success is guaranteed for any devotee who fully engages even in one of the senses in devotional service. So the Lord can be served very simply by any small ingredient, by a flower, a leaf, a fruit, or a little water, whichever is available, without any cost. But he can be served by the simple process of hearing and chanting. And then Prabhupada explains that one can serve the Lord by offering the result of one's work. It doesn't matter what one does. One should actually work on behalf of the Lord as a servant of God. Just like in the Prabhupada quotes this verse from the Bhagavad Gita 9:27. Yat karoshi yad ashnashi yad juhoshi dadashi yat tat tapasyasi konteya tat kurusva mat arpanam. Do whatever you like, or whatever may be easier for you to do. Eat whatever you may eat. Sacrifice whatever you can sacrifice. Give whatever you may give in charity, and do whatever you may undertake in penance. But everything must be done for him alone, for him only. If you do business, or if you accept some employment, do so on the behalf of the Lord. Whatever you may eat, you may offer the same to the Lord, and be assured that he will return the food after eating it himself. He is the complete whole. Therefore, whatever he may eat, as offered by the devotee, is accepted because of the Lord's love, but again, it is returned as prasad for the devotee, so that he can be happy by eating. In other words, be a servant of God and live peacefully in that consciousness, ultimately returning home back to Godhead. And Prabhupada says that one can perform bhakti at all stages of life. Even when the world is annihilated, one can perform bhakti at all times, at all places. One should remember. And Prabhupada writes in another part of the pulpit. Like I said, it's a long pulpit, and it's very interesting, this pulpit, so I thought I'll read this. If even for a moment remembrance of Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is missed, that is the greatest loss. That is the greatest illusion, and that is the greatest anomaly. The Lord can be worshipped in all stages of life. For example, even the wombs of their mothers, Maharaj Prahlad and Maharaj Parikshit worshipped the Lord. Maharaj Parikshit, he worshipped the Lord when he was in the womb, and the Lord appeared, right, to save him. Even in his childhood, at the age of only 5 years, Dhruva Maharaj worshipped the Lord. Even in full youth, Maharaj Ambarish worshipped the Lord. And even at the last stage of his frustration and old age, Maharaj Dhritarashtra worshipped the Lord. Ajamil worshipped the Lord even at the point of death, and Chitraketu worshipped the Lord even in heaven and hell. In the Nashinga Puran, it is said that as the hellish inhabitants began to chant the holy name of the Lord, they began to be elevated from hell towards heaven. So the conclusion of Srimad Bhagavatam, as given by Shukadeva Goswami to Maharaj Parikshit, is, O king, it is finally decided that everyone, namely those in the renounced order of life, the mystics, and the enjoyers of fruitive work, should chant the holy name of the Lord fearlessly to achieve the desired success in their pursuits. So in our next slide, the final conclusion of the 4 verses, one should love and worship him regardless of impurities. So the final conclusion, therefore, is that the glories of the Lord must be always and everywhere proclaimed. One should hear about his glories, one should chant about his glories, one should always remember his glories, because that is the highest perfectional stage of life. As far as fruitive work is concerned, it's limited to the body. As far as yoga is concerned, it's limited to the acquirement of mystic power. As far as empiric philosophy, Prabhupada writes, is concerned, is limited to the attainment of transcendental knowledge. And as far as transcendental knowledge is concerned, it is limited only to the attainment of salvation. And even if they are adopted, there's every chance of discrepancies in discharging the particular types of function. But adoption of transcendental devotional service has no limit. There's no fear of falling down. The process automatically reaches the final stage by the grace of the Lord. Prabhupada writes also that how in the early stages of devotional service, there is need for knowledge, but in the higher stage, there's no necessity of such knowledge. So the guaranteed path of progress is therefore engagement in Bhakti Yoga. So this is the end of the 4th verse, is that if one engages in Bhakti Yoga, one will attain the highest goal. So in our last slide, the Lord assures Brahma that he will be free from pride, and Brahma begins his work in creation, which is 37 to 40. Krishna says, "Oh Brahma, just follow this conclusion by fixed concentration of mind, and no pride will disturb you, neither in the partial or in the final devastation." So he's saying, if you love me, you will only see me, and you should develop this love by always engaging in devotional service. He's saying that if your mind is fully fixed on these conclusions, and if you are my servant and you're working under my guidance, then no pride will disturb you either in the partial or in the final devastation. Text 38, Shukadev Goswami said to Maharaj Parikshit, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, after being seen in this transcendental form, instructing Brahmaji, the leader of the living entities, disappeared. Text 39, on the disappearance of Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, who is the object of transcendental enjoyment for the senses of devotees, Brahma, with folded hands, began to recreate the universe full with living entities as it was previously. So I think I'll stop here and we'll give it over to Rati Preshta Mataji to explain the guidebook, the activities in the guidebook. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mataji. It was really very, very wonderful. So hidden and deep meanings, so elaborately explained, and the way you related the Chaturshloki Bhagavatam with Sambandha, Abhiday and Prayojan, it was really very helpful for all of us. So now I will share the guidebook presentation. Part 1 we had already covered. Today we are starting with the part 2. So the introspective activities, it begins with introspective activities. First one is, who am I? So a very reflective way for children to understand that we are different from our body and from our mind. So first they have to identify, basically describe various ways that they can to describe themselves. So different adjectives can be used here. Children should be encouraged to think as deep, meaning they should be able to speak anything that they want to speak about themselves. So like a girl, a daughter, a soft-hearted person with black hair, study in this school, good at dancing, hardworking, sincere, and then they will cross all those aspects which are related to their body. So I told her to put one cross on all the aspects which are related to body, and 2 cross on all the aspects which are related to mind. And then we went on to discuss that how all these qualities that were described before, they are all related to either body or mind. So then we are something different from the body and mind. The soul is soul is different from what is body and what is mind. So this is how it can help children to realize this point. And then there is also a comparison between uh, children can be encouraged to think about the differences and similarities of dreaming and waking life, and how does Prabhupada compares even the waking life here in this material world to be as a dream. So children can be encouraged to talk and discuss about this aspect. Then there is this wonderful artistic activity of creating a cosmic map of all the material as well as spiritual planets. So the younger one has colored the map, which was cosmic map, which was there in the book, and the elder daughter has.
Rati Preshta, we cannot see anything other than you. You're not displaying.
Sorry.
So we haven't really seen anything as yet. Yeah.
I'll just share it again. Is it visible now?
It's just starting. Yeah, now it's visible. Yeah.
Okay. So here, this was the introspective activity wherein she has written various aspects, and then I told her to cross all the aspects which were related to body and then to mind, and then we had a discussion further on how the soul is different and above than the mind and body, and then it was followed up by discussion on how the present life in material world is actually a dream if we consider it in the entire life, the existence span. And then there is this wonderful artistic activity wherein my younger daughter colored this cosmic map which was given in the guidebook itself, and elder one has drawn her own, the way of, by her own understanding, she has tried to depict the material world here with Garbhodakshay Vishnu lying in the Garbhodak ocean, and then how lotus is stemming, and then within the stem of the lotus there are all 14 planetary systems she has tried to show, and then Brahmaji, and then these various layers, earth, water, fire, air, ether, and then Virja river, which is separating material universes from spiritual planets, and then all Vaikuntha's planets, then Kailash planet, and then Ayodhya planet, and then above all is Guru Vrindavan. So, meaning very systematically, it has been described also in the chapter, and I was very glad to, meaning this was real when I was, when I was trying to understand these things as a young adolescent. It was really very complicated for me to understand this mystery of, three Purusha avatars, Garbhodakshay Vishnu, Kshirodakshay Vishnu, all this, and children of such a young age, 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, children are developing this kind of understanding because this guidebook is so systematically presenting the things that it is going inside, and children are able to actually realize all these things. These are very subtle things for children, but still they are able to understand. That is why these drawings and images they are able to comprehend and do and make. So this is one of the most wonderful way to help children go deep into the philosophical aspects and understand how great Krishna is. Then next is Chatur Shloki paper chain. Here, here children are supposed to make this, paper like we make paper dolls. So similarly, this they have to fold the paper, one long strip of paper, and then half, then again half, and then they have to draw half lotus and cut it. When we open it, it opens like this four chain of four lotuses, and then they can write 4 shlokas on this, and they can decorate it beautifully. They have also put some on stem below. So this is how again reinforcement of what they have learned in a very artistic manner, and helping children to take the messages deeper. And then this very wonderful artistic activity of decorative stones. So whatever they have learned in this chapter we went into our society and found some stones, and then we washed them thoroughly, and then children sat with paints and brushes, and then I told them to use their own creativity and come up with anything that they want to depict from what they have learned in this chapter. So wonderfully, elder daughter made 3 stones. One was blue color. She wanted to show material world, and on another stone she wrote tapa, and on another stone she made girirajji. So she said, this material world is, we are in material world, but by the strength of tapasya and austerity, we can reach Girirajji and we can reach a spiritual planet Golok Vrindavan. And the younger one was, she said, her understanding was like she took 2 stones. On one, she had shown that how big the material world is. It's like a big deep ocean, and by the strength of tapasya, it becomes very small. So we can easily cross over it. So this was their way of imaginative way of decorating the stones from what they have learned from the story. And then there are some writing activities which bring about help children to develop their writing skills further. So this is one comparative analysis of Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. So Chaturshloki Bhagavad Gita and Chaturshloki Bhagavatam. So what are some of the common aspects and what comparisons children can draw? They can be encouraged to read the translations and purpose and come with their own comparison points. Thereafter, there is an activity of speech writing wherein they have to imagine that they are the witness when Lord Narayana came and spoke to Lord Brahma, and then they have to write a speech as per their own understanding, wherein they have to introduce Lord Brahma, what is their relationship with Brahmaji, and what are various events that they would like to glorify in the life of Brahmaji, and how today they can benefit from, they can continue to take that benefit of association from Brahmaji by following, so she wrote that we can continue to benefit from his association even today by reading and listening Srimad Bhagavatam attentively. Also, we need to be austere in our spiritual life. And then there is this reading and comprehension activity, which helps children to identify what new things they have discovered in this chapter, what are the interesting facts which were new for them, and if any questions are still they want an answer to, they can also be explored. Then the sentence matchup. So they have to look at the sentence on the right part and the left part of the table, and then they have to match accordingly. What word fits the clues? So there are some clues given in the box, and there are sentence clues, and children have to match, find out what. This is also a way of, encouraging them to show their understanding of what they have read in the chapter. And this missing word activity sheets, again, very interesting way to help children summarize their learnings, spelling errors, linguistic development, wherein they have to identify first which is the word that is spelled wrongly, and then they have to spell it rightly. Then sequencing activity, again, a very interesting and an innovative way of how children can make a mental map of entire chapter and then sequence it properly. Then this is a very creative way of expression wherein children have to make a small booklet, a book kind of this thing. They were so excited. Some friends also came, and we just took one hard paper, colored, and inside there were 4 sheets, A4 size, and I just folded them and stapled it, and it came out like a book, and they were so excited. Oh wow, we are writing a book. And then they how I found my source about Brahmaji. So the entire story of the chapter was meaning there are various sequences. So on the left hand side, they will write a caption, and on right hand side, it will be depicted in form of drawings. So beginning with, they began their story with how there was a Garbhodak question, and within that there was Garbhodakshai Vishnu, and then they drew it. They wrote one line, once upon a time, like this it started, and then they were continuing. This activity is not yet finished, so they are still in the process of making this booklet. So they can depict this entire story in a very innovative way, and they will always have ownership of that. They have written this story on their own and in a form of book. And then there are keywords followed by definition. There are true or false, wherein they have to identify also why do they think these statements are correct or false. Then there are the answers to understanding story and all sequencing, keywords, word search. So thank you all. Now we will open the session for question answers. I will change the settings so that audience can unmute themselves. We can please raise our hands for questions so that Mataji can help enlighten us.
So this is a very philosophical chapter, so I'm not surprised. So we can, if there's no questions, we can end the session now. But I would definitely encourage everyone to study these 4 verses. As I mentioned earlier, these are very important. They're the essence of all Vedic knowledge, which is given from by Krishna to Brahma. And Prabhupada writes how everyone can realize these 4 shlokas if one follows in the path of Brahma. So I would encourage everyone to. And Rati Preshna Mataji, you did a wonderful job of explaining these activities. They are it was really good, especially those activities regarding the explanation of the Chatur Shloki and so this helps the children to also understand to a certain extent. It can be very simple for them, but any child can understand this part. That
Yes,
how
Mataji. It is so wonderfully covered up in the guidebook that I myself wonder that how these children so young age and they can remember, they have remembered these Chatur Shloki because it is again and again emphasized, re-emphasized again and again in different forms. So it becomes very lively for children. Yeah, very good. Yes, because once we understand that there's nothing, beyond Krishna, in other words, there's nothing that's separate from Krishna. It is a great leap, in a spiritual advancement, because we realize the importance of of having a relationship with him, and how we as part and parcel of Krishna are meant to serve the whole. And then going on to the prema, how that is the goal of all our activities, and then how we can do that. So it's been very, very nicely described in this. Canto 2 is just full with beautiful puppets. Like I mentioned a while ago, that how Prabhupada put everything in these 2 cantos, Canto 1 and Canto 2, because he wasn't sure that he was going to live past these. And so he's put everything. In other words, if one simply reads these 2 cantos and nothing more, one can go back to Godhead, because everything is here. And that's why this Canto 2 pretty much concludes with these 4 verses. Of course, there's one more chapter left that we will cover next week, and this will end our 2nd canto. So thank you very much for your audience, and we'll hear from you next week. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji. Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.